Hi guys, SpectreGaming here, and welcome back to some more Total Warhammer 2. This is to, again, help newer players. So I've just picked out a few good races that are strong, and a few evil races that are strong. And it's to basically get you into the game. Because we had a weird thing last night that Pharaoh brought to my attention. So this is my played hours. You've got things like win a legendary campaign, which I've only just bothered to do because some of the campaigns are quite frustrating. But this was the thing that Pharaoh brought up. So shout out to Pharaoh. So this is the global achievements, if I go on here. And only 68%, 68.3 have had a lord at level 10. And you can get a lord to level 10 within probably 30 turns, depending on the campaign. But it doesn't take long to get a lord to level 10. Bear in mind the level cap is 40. So that's only 25% of the way through a lord's levels. So it doesn't take long to get that. So I'm feeling that in some cases, either people are jumping into too high difficulty, thinking they know how to play the game and then don't, or they don't know what to build and are getting killed by the AI. So you're building like very garbage units. So if you build, you can build most things in easy and kind of get away, but in normal, some units stop working that well, and in hard, a lot of units stop working that well. So this is to try and help newer people into the game. So what I've done is, shout out to Mitch and Duke for giving me the idea, is I'm going to show you guys some campaign setups. So, since we had dwarves on, we'll start with dwarves, but we need to go to the dwarf early game. So I'm going to show you it in stages. So I can find the dwarf early game, there it is. Right, so this is showing you a full 20 stack army. You won't have all these units in the beginning like the heroes. You might get them slightly later on, but it's showing you what you can put in the army, what you like having there. Because I use the runesmiths as scouts. You need to have one hero type as a scout in every army. You have to. Get used to using them, and it's so you don't run forward into 3 or 4 enemy armies in the fog of war that you can't see. So it's always important to have one hero type as a scout. And if you're going to have the other heroes in your army, obviously you can't use them as scouts, because you only get so much capacity of heroes as well, based on the buildings they come from. So your early game army, dwarf warriors with shields. The reason shields is they've got some protection against enemy missiles. That's the idea. You pretty much have quarrelers to begin with, and then grudge throwers. You can get this more or less early on. If you can't afford a full 20 stack, don't worry. But just try and make sure you've got 3 to 4 of your front line at least, and then as many quarrels as you can shove in, and try and get in a good thrower. Good throwers you can obtain quite early on, so it's not that hard to get. So I'll show you the dwarf mid game. So mid game dwarves, almost exactly the same. The only difference is you've upgraded your dwarf warriors to longbeards with shields. They're a better frontline unit. They hold longer. They do a better job of keeping the enemy from getting to your range units. I put these as quarrels with great weapons. You can keep them as normal quarrelers. You don't have to change them. It means if they do get engaged in combat, quarrels with great weapons are armor piercing, then in close quarter combat they'll do more damage. So they can hold themselves a bit better in close quarter combat. And obviously, as you have a really in-depth tech tree with the dwarves, as the units get upgraded in the combat side of things, they become quite formidable later on. They scale really, really high. Basically, with dwarves is, the longer you are alive, the more chance you've got of running over any enemy. Dwarves are weakest in the early game. If you make it to the late game, your opponent's already fucked up. 3 units of Thunderers, you can put those in between a gap of each of these guys. The armor piercing, you've just got to be careful because you can shoot your own guys. and they will kill your own guys by shooting them in the back. So in some cases, what you can do is, if there's a bigger enemy units like cavalry size upwards, you can target those with these, and they won't shoot your own guys, they shoot over their heads. But just be a bit careful how you deploy them. If you find out you're fucking up your own front line, just replace them for quarrelers. And then again, you've got your good throwers. And then your late game is what was on initially. Late game's exactly the same thing, apart from you've got iron breakers. Iron breakers have even better melee defense. They're even tankier than longbeards, but they also throw explosive barrels at the enemy. So they've also got a range attack of their own as they come in. But basically, with this army for the dwarves is like the main army to build, because you haven't got any cavalry, so you can't really build a viable melee army. Because chasing down range units will be a fucking pain in the arse. You've got no mages, so you can't really do that either. So this is pretty much the only main options to build. But these armies will work in any difficulty. All the way up to legendary, these armies will work. And dwarves are ridiculously strong in the auto-resolve. So you haven't really got to worry too much in a lot of cases. I've seen dwarf armies auto-resolve 2 armies from another faction in high difficulties. So that they are really, really strong. But it's been on those so you can review them, so you can go back and have a look if I went over some a bit too quickly. So what I will do now is then I will go on to Empire, since people like to start with Empire like my friend Mitch. So if I do ranged early game, this is your Empire early game. So I've put an Arch-Lector in there. You can put an Empire General in there if you want. The only ones that I wouldn't use is I wouldn't use a Huntsman General. You want someone who can fight and hold the line and give you a bit more. I'm not putting the Legendary Lords in there because I don't know who you're going to play. Obviously, this will initially be your Legendary Lord. So if you choose Karl Franz or Volkmar, it'll be them. If you choose Balthazar Gelt, then it's him. If you choose Balthazar Gelt, you don't generally need a second wizard. One wizard in an army is quite sufficient, because you've only got 1 mana pool, so you can only use so many spells in a given time frame. And if you go down to 0 mana, you then can't regenerate any mana. So you've got to stay at least 1 mana to get your mana reserves back up. So don't go blowing through your mana either, is the other idea. So, but if you're playing Balthazar Gelt, you can probably put in like an Empire Captain or something like that instead. But an army where you have normally an Arch-Lector or an Empire General, which can both work, then put in a wizard. The wizards I recommend using the Laws of Magic. Fire wizards, because they have Burning Head, they have Piercing Bolts of Burning, and they have Flamestorm. Flamestorm, you don't want to use that near your front line, because it's randomly moving, so it can move back into your own army and kill you. Burning Head you've got to be a bit careful with as well, because it can sometimes veer a little bit. So if you think it might veer, don't use it too close to your front line. But the Piercing Bolts is a static bombardment spell. That one's really good in the front line, and it works versus armoured units. So it's good all the way into the late game. Other types of wizards that you can use is, I think this is Shadow for them. I think. Yeah, so they have Penumbral Pendulum, which is another wind spell. It goes in a line, basically. That one doesn't veer, and that one's quite strong, so that one you can use. And then they have Pit of Shades, which is their vortex, but this one doesn't move. It is a stationary vortex. So that one you can use near your line. Just make sure that when you're deploying it, it's not covering your troops, it's only covering theirs. So you can use both of those quite effectively. The only other one is it this guy? No, not him. It's got to be this guy. This guy. Yes. So you've got Wind Blast that can do some magical damage, but it's weak versus armour, same as Burning Head. So if you're against armoured troops, probably not worth wasting your magic on. You've got Durinon's Thunderbolt. You can use that. It's more localized though, so it's not a very big area. You've got Comet Akasanadora, which has got a very large explosion area, but be careful because you can fuck up your own troops if you deploy it in the wrong place. And then again you've got a Vortex, but the Vortex on this one again is randomly moving, so don't use that in your front line. But these spells are all really, really strong in sieges, so while the enemy sat behind the walls doing nothing, you can move your wizard up to the walls and just start basically going through your mana pool. So use enough spells to get it down low, then let your mana recover. Then use more spells again, let it recover. Your wizard will churn out an absolute shit ton of damage and get a lot of kills, and it will affect the enemy's morale. So then all your range units have got to do, and your melee units is mop up. And it's an easy win. Because you're looking, your battles may take a bit longer in sieges with a ranged army, as they generally do. They can sometimes take 30 or more minutes, where melee armies can finish battles much quicker in sieges. But melee armies will take more casualties than a ranged army. Ranged armies shouldn't take much in the way of casualties. And when you start to move up the difficulties, in like very hard and legendary, you're looking to mitigate your casualties in each battle. If you're taking too many casualties and you've got to fight another battle, you might find yourself losing. In the case of like auto-resolves, some people say don't auto-resolve in high difficulties. It's complete bollocks. You can auto-resolve if it is safe to do so. And by that, this comes down to scouting out with a hero, making sure there's not another army within a turn of you that can attack you. So then you can at least occupy a settlement, and you can get at least one full turn of recovery into your troops. That's what you want to look at. Sometimes one turn's all you need to get your army fully recovered, but you've just got to make sure it's safe to do so. If it's safe to do so, you can auto-resolve, as long as you don't lose any units and stuff like that, or unless it's units you don't mind losing. You know, so if it's a good strong auto-resolve that's drastically in your favour, you lose no units, you can auto-resolve. But check it out first, make a smart decision. And what I will show you now is, I'll show you the mid-game, the mid and late game actually on this one. So this is your mid and late game, because you can get great swords fairly quickly. They're a tier 3 unit, so you can build it also in a town rather than in a city. You've got your crossbowmen, and you've got 3 handgunners. They work the same way that your dwarf thunderers do, so you can use those. Mortars are the better ranged unit because they fire up and over, so you can still kind of fire these while units are engaged in combat. Just probably don't aim immediately at your front line, but you can replace them in the later game with these mortars here, Suitsons, because Suitsons mortars have a magical ammo and it doesn't harm your own troops, so you can fire those at want and abandon. One Hellstorm because it's super long range, so you can use it if you're against like an enemy army that has their own artillery. You'll outrange them, you can take out their artillery. It can cause a lot of damage. Just as their front line comes to meet yours, maybe stop that shooting, because it will start to fire. It doesn't fire up and down like a mortar, it fires at more of an arc, and if it can't quite get the arc, it will obliterate your troops in front of the Hellstorm. So be quite careful how you use it. If you're not confident in using it, then replace that with a unit of either Quarrelers or another mortar, and that's basically your army that you basically use. Again, you can have an Archlector or a General. Put a Warrior Priest in there and get yourself one of the 3 mages. So it's either a Fire Mage, a Shadow Mage, or a Mage of Heavens. They're the 3 laws I recommend using. If it's not one of those 3, don't bother with it. Those 3 are the best in terms of damage output, and you're looking to cause damage with your wizard to break the enemy army. The others are more finicky, more utility based, don't have as good spells. Those are your 3 best laws. And then if you're playing High Elves, you have the higher law, but I'll come to that later on. So what we'll do is now we'll do early game melee empire. For those of you who want to try the early side, the melee side out. So this one, a bit weird. A bit different. So in this one I've got a warrior priest and an empire captain in each army. I've put a wizard in there as well because, again, certain spells can be used in your front line when you're fighting, and they are still really strong in sieges. They can cause a lot of damage. So you can soften them up with your wizard before you send in your troops, and they've got an easier time winning the siege. They don't take as much damage then. Empire swordsmen early on, because they're easy to get hold of. You know, you're looking to go offensive. Empire knights, your basic knights, using those mainly to basically control the flanks, kill enemy cavalry, and run down their ranged units. That's what the purpose is. I'll put a unit of ogres there because you can get ogres quite early on, because all you do is, when you're occupying settlements, you'll eventually get an ogre pit. Just go and recruit some ogres. The idea for the ogres is they charge in and they destroy the gate your knights are going to, and then your knights can funnel into the city. The other side of the city is where you'll be sending your swordsmen, but your swordsmen ideally spend one turn building some siege equipment, so you've got a couple of siege towers, because if your infantry go up the wall on ladders, they get very tired by the time they're on the wall. It basically gives them fatigue. It's the penalty they get for climbing ladders. Where if they go up a siege tower, they go onto the wall fresh or active, so they maintain their vigour, so they don't get tired as quickly. And melee units that are tired fight like shit. If they're not tired, they fight really good. So maintaining that's quite good. So sometimes you can build one set of 2 siege towers, or you can build 2 sets of 2 siege towers. The choice is personally yours. Obviously, the longer you're besieging it, the more chance they've got of sending an army to try and relieve it. But that's personal choice on how you want to work that. I mean, you can also, if necessary, you could also get rid of a unit of knights or a unit of swordsmen, because you've got, what, 9? You could put another unit of ogres and just have another unit of ogres break down the other gate, and you can funnel them in the gate that way. So there's a few ways you can do it. But that is your early game one. Melee mid game. I wish you put these all in the same faction order. Nope, don't work. I was hoping it would. Right, melee mid game. All you're doing is switching out your swordsmen for halberdiers. Halberdiers normally are more of a defensive unit, but they do have armor piercing, which is really good for killing enemy units and breaking a front line open faster. I've just picked Knights of the Blazing Sun because they have the next upgrade after Empire Knights, so they're not that hard to obtain again. Same sort of thing. And then mid. Where the fuck? There are they? There they are. This is your Empire late game army. So you change your halberdiers out, or your swordsmen if you still kept your swordsmen, because you can do in some cases, for great swords. You get great swords in there, and then have a mix of demigryph knights. So there's 3 that are anti-infantry, 3 that are anti-large. So the anti-large ones can better deal with enemy cavalry. The anti-infantry ones, try and get them out of combat with cavalry if you can, and send them round to destroy enemy range units. And then you've got your ogres to get them in the gate, though these can destroy gates pretty quickly themselves. So it's optional whether you want to keep the ogres or not, it's entirely your choice. It's just an option there that makes this a bit easier to use. And you'll find out they work effectively, again, in... These are for any difficulty. The simpler the army, the stronger the army. If you make an army complex, it's weak as shit. You don't have complex armies. And if you get used to using these armies when you're new to the game, so like easy, normal, hard, you can also use these armies in very hard and legendary. They do work. I know they work because I've used them myself. So you don't have to worry about them not working, but you do have to play them smart, obviously, on how you're going to use certain things. But if you play them when you first start playing the game, you'll get the experience you'll need to use these armies in the later game. Because the thing is, in very hard and above, not all units work. The game's designed kind of in that way. Most units don't work. You can't just go, oh right, I like this army, I'll build an army of these. It probably won't work. Because the difficulty changes it where the enemy gets a lot of buffs. That's why you see a lot of ranged armies that players use, because they get substantial buffs in melee that we don't get as a player. But certain melee armies can still work. And then in the case of this, like when you've got your lord and you're buffing your lord's tree, you'll be buffing the great swords and your cavalry, making them stronger on both sides of the red tree, which is what buffs your army. So you've only got so many points anyway, obviously you can't buff everything. So you buff certain units. So the game's designed it in that way, that you can only buff say 2 or 3 units tops. Otherwise then your lord's missing out on combat skills or magic that they can use. In terms of mounts as well, since Empire have got mounts and Dwarves don't, I wouldn't really mount your lord or your warrior priest. Your mages put on a Pegasus. Keep them out of the way is the idea. They can be shot at, but you can avoid arrows and you can give them some missile resistance or a ward save or physical resistance. They'll protect them from most range units, at least to a good degree. Your Empire Captain you can mount on a Pegasus, because he can be kind of used as a bodyguard for your mage if something tries to attack him, but then he can also go in with the cavalry and take out enemy artillery and range units. But if you have an Arch-Lector and a warrior priest, keep them on foot. If you have an Empire General, put him on a Griffin, so then he's also up in the sky as well. But apart from that, that's basically your Empire army. That's both your melee and your ranged versions. So we'll move on to next, on to High Elves. High Elves have also got 2 different armies you can use. Ranged early game. So ranged early game is quite simple. You want a handmaiden, you want a prince. I would not take an archmage, because then you can take a normal mage in there. If you're going to take an archmage, there's no point taking a second mage. And then you might as well take something else like a lawmaster, because then you need someone who can help hold your front line and fight enemy combat heroes and lords. In some cases, some people do take a lawmaster anyway, and you can just get rid of a unit of archers. So you can tweak it slightly to how you want. But you'll have spearmen in the beginning, so you won't have access to much else. And then you've got archers and 2 bolt throwers. Your bolt throwers are obviously you're going to be using multi-shot to fuck up enemy infantry and cavalry to a degree. And then in sieges you want to bring down a tower that's nearby and then a section of wall, because you might not have enough ammo to bring down 2 towers. And then you can move units up in segments to fire over the wall. Ammo is balance of power, but if you're damaging enemy units up to like 70% damaged, then it's worth using a lot of your ammo. And then what you can do is then you send in your front line along with your lord and maybe a handmaiden to a degree. And if you've got a lawmaster, you can send in a lawmaster. Your nobles are your scouts, so don't put nobles in your army, use those as scouts. And obviously your mage can also cast spells as well. With High Elves, again, you've got same 3 laws the humans use. You've got fire, shadow and heavens, but you've also got high magic as an option as well. They do have some good spells in there, but like their wind spell is really, really, really fucking expensive. It is this one here. So they've got Fiery Convocation, but it's 15 winds of magic, which is half your magical pool, and that's not overcast. So it does do a lot of damage, but it is very expensive to cast. But that is a wind spell. You've got Tempest, which is a vortex, so be careful with that one. I think you've got is it just those 2 on here? That one can attack like characters, I suppose. Imagine this one not really bother about. So you've got 2. You've got a vortex and you've got a wind, but they are both quite expensive. So it's up to you if you want to take those. Personally, my my favourite laws are Fire and Heavens, and then Shadow in like 3rd place, because most factions can get access to at least one of those laws in most cases. We'll go on to your mid game. Did I just do late on this one? That's melee. Melee, melee, melee. I might have just done that one then. Well, that's a late game option. So you can put a mid version in here, but you can also use it in the late game as well. So again, you have the same thing: Lord, a Mage, a Handmaiden. I put Phoenix Guard here because you can use Phoenix Guard, and then you're basically switching out your normal High Elf archers for Sisters of Avalon. I think you need a DLC pack to get Sisters though. But Sisters are basically a direct upgrade to normal archers, essentially. Because the one thing they have that you need is armor-piercing missiles. You need that for the late game, because a lot more units start to get the armoured trait. And normal archers aren't that effective against armoured units. So you're better off taking Sisters for that purpose. And then all you're doing is upgrading your front line. You don't have to use Phoenix Guard. The other ones you can use are Silvering Guard, which are from the Eltharion DLC. So you can use those. They're like better spearmen who've got the armoured trait. So you can use Silvering Guard or Phoenix Guard for your front line, but you need to have Sisters for this type of army to work, because in the later game you just get too many units with armoured. If you're shooting at like Black Hawks with normal archers, and there's a full army of Black Hawks and Stone Trolls coming at you, they're going to laugh in your archers' faces. You need to have them with piercing missiles in order to bring them down fast enough. Otherwise they're going to walk straight over you. Right, melee High Elves, which a lot of people don't tend to use, but you can use, and it works very well. Works very, very well. So this is your melee early game. I've gone super early for you guys, so you can see what kind of units you'll have. It's kind of like the Empire one. So you've got Rangers, and then you've got Illyrian Reavers. But Illyrian Reavers, unlike Empire Knights, they haven't even got the armoured trait. They are fast cavalry. They are not tanky cavalry, but it's just so you can recruit them in the early game. Otherwise, the next available cavalry would be Silver Helms? What are they called? Silver Helms. Next available cavalry would be Silver Helms. So it's just to keep it affordable in the early game for you. Rangers, because they're better for attacking than spearmen, and they've also got 20% physical resistance. So you take Rangers and then Illyrian Reavers. Again, a unit of Rogues to break down the gates for the cavalry. That sort of thing. You go for the same sort of setup. Keep it simple. Makes it strong. Melee mid-game. So here, you've got White Lions and you've got Silver Helms with shields. And again, a unit of Ogres there. The White Lions you can use in the late game as well if you want. It's personal preference on that. You don't have to change them out. Because the two units you can use here are White Lions or Swordmasters of Hoeth. Because they've both got great weapons, they've both got armor piercing, they're both good in combat. The difference being that these have got 30% missile resistance and your Swordmasters haven't. So your Swordmasters might take more damage from a ranged army going in. These will take less damage going in. But they're both good units that can work. And they can kill whatever they come across because of their armor-piercing damage. And these stats will obviously go up as they rank up and as you put buffs into their red tree traits. Lord, Swordmaster and a Mage in this particular case, because Swordmaster is going to help even more with the front line. Put your Lord on a Dragon. It can help take out artillery. It makes him a far more effective fighting machine. If you're taking a Fire Mage, you can put them on a Sun Dragon. So that enables her to potentially fight if needed, but it keeps her out of harm's way so she can cast her spells. But that is more, it's a mid and late game. The only thing you'll be changing will be the Cavalry. The Cavalry you will eventually change out. So this is like a late game variant. Swordmasters are again one that you can put in there, but they're more susceptible to missiles. They do have a 20% chance to block missiles because they're so good with their swords. But then you've got 30% missile resistance with the White Lions, which is basically because they've got a thick cloak, they take 30% less damage. So they're quite disgusting. Your best cavalry is your Dragon Princes, and they've got physical resistance and fire resistance. So if you do have a Fire Mage, you haven't got to worry as much about dropping a fire spell near these guys, because they are resistant to most of the fire damage. So they do work very, very well. So that'll be the main change, but you can still use Swordmasters in place of these if you want. The reason I put Swordmasters in the mid game is because they have an earlier building tier. They're easy to get hold of. You can get hold of Swordmasters, I think, at tier 2 or 3, and Swordmasters are 1 tier later. So it's just because these are take a bit longer to get a hold of, so I've gone up in how quickly you can attain them in the campaign. But that's both your ranged and melee variants for the High Elves. The last one for the good guys is Lizardmen. Now luckily these are all in a row. Lizard early. You'll normally have some Sauruses without shields to begin with, but I've put Sauruses in with shields just so you can see, because obviously reducing missile damage on the way in is always effective, and then Cold One Spear Riders. These do work, it's just that they can sometimes be unreliable because they have the primal instincts, which means when they take damage, they can rampage. When they rampage, you can't control them. They'll attack the nearest enemy unit that they go to. Get yourself a Saurus Old Blood, or whatever your lord may be, a Scar Veteran, mount both of these guys on Carnosaurs, it just gets them to combat quick and they do damage, and then a Skink Priest of Heavens, because they've got limited laws for the Lizardmen, despite knowing every single law of magic in the known game, and they've only got Heavens. Get Heavens and put him on an Engine of the Gods for his mount later on, because then you've got a nice big ability you can also use that'll do quite a bit of damage. But that is your early game one on those. Mid game, you'll still have the same Sauruses for the most part. You might have some Temple Guard. You've got your Cold and Spear Riders, and I've put in 2 monsters on the end. Feral Stegodon and a Feral Carnosaur. And then if we go on to your late game, this is where things can get a little bit more interesting, especially with the new DLC. So you want to change your Sauruses out for Temple Guard. Temple Guard have got armor piercing for melee attacks, so you want them. It's important to have them. You want horned ones for your cavalry. They're better and they're also armor piercing. They do still have the primal instincts, unfortunately. And then you've still got your Carnosaur, but you've also got a Coatl. Because this fucking thing can cast Uranom's Thunderbolts and Lesser Chain Lightning, which, although it's called Lesser, don't have that for you, it does a lot of fucking damage. And it's a flying unit. So if you have problems with the enemy artillery, that can always fly over the enemy front line and murder their artillery for you. If you want to, you can take 2 of those rather than another Carnosaur. Because technically, with your Lord and your Hero, you're already going to have 2 Carnosaurs in your army. So if you want to, you can put 2 of those in there. Just so you've got a bit more terror causing to help break the enemy line open. Rinse and repeat, again it works. Just these, I haven't really field tested that much. But I fought against them and they cause me no end of arseache. They're a pain in the arse. Right, on to evil factions. With the Dark Elves, nice and good. Your early game Dark Elves, again, you want a Dreadlord. Do not take the ranged variant. And as I said, I'd advise not to take Spellcaster apart from the hero version, not the Lord version. If there's any other Lord version, yeah, there is. Supremes in there. Yeah, so that's how little I use those. Death Hag, she's really good. Stick her on a Cauldron of Blood. Don't upgrade her Yellow Tree traits until you put her on the Cauldron, because it will sometimes bug out, and the stats will remain low after you put her on the Cauldron of Blood. So you put her on the Cauldron first, then upgrade her melee stats. She's good at holding the front line. She has some nasty buffs she can give to your troops nearby. She helps just keep these in place longer, and Dread Spears are complete shit, just for the FYI. When you get your Sorceress and you get chance, put her on a Pegasus to keep her out of harm's way again. And then your Lord, eventually put your Lord on a Black Dragon. You can sometimes keep them on foot, it's personal preference. I've put Shades in here straight away because you can get Shades really early on. Now you won't be able to afford a full army like this really early on, so you might have, say, 4 Dread Spears, but then you might have, say, 6 units of Shades, but they are still your early game unit. Once you've got enough money where you can afford a full army, that's what your first army will kind of look like in the early game. And these are obviously, again, same way they are with the High Elves. Multi-shot you'll be using to kill enemy infantry and cavalry. In a siege, you're bringing down a tower nearby and then a section of wall. And then you can maybe try for another tower if you need to or want to. Depends how you want to use your ammo. But make sure you bring down the immediate threat tower and a section of wall, so your units can go by pretty much unmolested. These look bad to begin with because they've got lower range. They've only got 130 range. But there's a technology upgrade that gives them more range. And there's a red tree upgrade at rank 7 that also gives them more range. So I think they get to about 159 range. So they actually do get basically to the same as like Dwarf Quarrelers. So the range is actually not bad. And then on your non-legendary lords and on your admirals, you can get a Name of Power upgrade at level 10. The Name of Power one you want is the one that improves your army. Because there are 2 on there. Well, there's 3 or 4 that work with Shades, but there are 2 that are really good. One that gives them a 5% range increase. I forgot the name of that one though. And one that gives them I think it's a 15 or 20% range increase. And it's called Shadow Dart. If you get Shadow Dart, these become the longest ranged unit, infantry based wise, in the game. They have over 200 range. I think it's something like 219 or something they cap out at. It's further than Way Watchers. And the fact they've got armor piercing missiles, they can kill basically anything. And they've also got Stalk and Vanguard. So Stalk means they can't be seen until the enemy gets close. And Vanguard, you can deploy them almost right up to the enemy army. Now you would think, why would you normally do that? But you can use it to wipe out enemy artillery if they outrange you. Because the range of bolt throw is only 358 shit. So if you're against, say, Empire, you can deploy on your front line, take out their Hellstorms, their mortars, whatever, and then withdraw your Shades backwards. And put your front line forwards. And then your Shades actually are quite good in combat. So they will hold for a while. So if like cavalry come at you, you can move 2 units of Shades onto the flanks to hold the cavalry up, pull the rest back, fire at the cavalry, delete the cavalry, while your front line's coming forward. Shades are... they're like an All-Slayer unit. See, mid-game, you'll have Blackguard in here because you can get them not too late in. And the one thing you want to be aware of with Dark Elves, you might recruit from your settlements in the very early game. In the mid to late game, you are unrecruiting from Black Arcs. All your settlements should be built around maintaining public order, generating money, and improving the strength of your garrisons. There shouldn't be any reason for you to recruit from a settlement. You can recruit from a Black Hawk and you can recruit like Shades at like rank 8. You can recruit Blackguard at rank 8 or 9. You can recruit bolt throwers, I think, at rank 6 or 7. So there's no reason to recruit from a city when you can recruit much higher ranks from a Black Hawk. And Black Hawks have got a really large recruitment zone. So your Black Hawks are your mobile recruiting stations, and then you can build this same army on your Black Hawks to defend it. So these are what you want. That's your best frontline option. They've got armor piercing as well, but they've also got really high melee defense. They're good at taking a charge. That's what you want. If some of these die, it's not the end of the world. The only time these will really maybe affect a battle being won is if it's a siege and you've used most of your ammo and the enemy still haven't broken. You then send in your Lord, your Death Hag and your Blackguard into the city to mop up what's left. And if you've done all the ammo with your shades, bolt throwers and the magic with your sorcerers, that shouldn't be much. In your late game, the only thing I've changed here is I've put in shades with greatswords. Normal shades are fine. They do the same damage ranged wise as shades with greatswords. The damage is exactly the same bit of armor piercing. The difference with these is that these are anti-infantry, so they've got a slight damage bonus versus infantry, but they've also got armor piercing melee attacks. So if they do get attacked in melee, they can defend themselves and even beat other units in combat. So that's the only reason I say shades with greatswords for your late game, because they are more expensive. But your Black Hawks can get these super cheap because they get like massive upkeep reductions. So they're really good for that. Beastmen early game. The reason I'm showing these, this is what you get. I don't put Brave Shamans in my army because Brave Shamans, they haven't got great laws of magic. The only viable one is Shadow. So you could put a Brave Shaman of Shadow in there in place of one of these two, if you wanted. But then you need to have one of them as a scout for your army. You just have to have them. But if not, you can keep the Brave Shamans as scouts, and then you can recruit whatever law you want. Because it doesn't make a difference on the law. They're there to scout for you and wound enemy heroes. That's their purpose. This is basically what you'll be given. You might have a few gores, chaos spawn. It might vary based on the legendary lord. That's basically what you're going to be having in your super early game. Your early to mid game, it'll be something more like this. I mean, you can probably put these in the early game. They're not bad for running down like enemy archers. You'll have a few mix and match ones. And then your late game is where it can come to life. There are two different versions. Oops, that was on Dark Elves. Which is this. This is the Chaos Spawn army, which you recruit if you're taking a Beast Lord. One of the abilities at the top as well, I think it's called Slug Skin. You need to take that because it gives missile resistance to your Chaos Spawn. And at rank 7 you also get more missile resistance. So you can have Chaos Spawn with 25% missile resist, which is really good for keeping them alive against range units. And because they're a larger target, they can be shot quite easily. So then giving them 25% missile resist, they don't die. Or don't die as easily. 3 Bestigors, they're there to help against some anti-large units like Slayers and stuff, and they can go over the walls in a siege tower or whatever like that, or just climb ladders and, you know, annoy enemy range units on the walls. Chaos Spawn, 1 Giant, 2 Jabber Scythes, a Gorgon. Basically your army. You'll change this army round slightly if you're playing with a Minotaur Lord, with this Doombull here. If you're taking him, you don't need to take Bestigors so much, you could take normal Gors. All of the Chaos Spawn will become Minotaurs. It doesn't matter what Minotaurs they are, I take a complete mix. So I'll take some non-Minotaurs, Minotaurs with shields and Minotaurs with weapons, because they all do the job perfectly fine. And then again, take 4 months on the end. For Minotaurs though, I normally take 2 Gorgons, but you can just take 2 Jabber Scythes as well. Jabber Scythes actually work better in sieges because of their ability here, Aura of Madness. That works really well when they bottleneck you in the gate area of a siege, or if you bring the wall down with Shatterstone. Basically they do damage to all units within 40 meters, both on the wall and on the ground. So they're really good at breaking the enemy front lines. Your armies are very, very powerful. It's the strongest evil faction at the moment in the game. They're really easy to use. More people should try them and play them. If you want to play a melee army that works, definitely try Beastmen. And they can ambush in their normal attack stance, which, if you ambush somebody and they've got a ranged army, they are dead. They are so fucked. Chaos Warriors is the last one. It's a frustrating campaign to play at the moment because they don't have a mechanic like Beastmen with the Herdstones, where they can stop armies recolonizing. But Chaos do work. One thing you'll notice on all the armies as well is I haven't recommended any Doomstacks. Doomstack armies are cheap, they're unskilled. They basically play themselves. Other armies can work, that's why I'm showing you armies that can work, that you can get early on. You don't need to Doomstack. Doomstacking, you don't need to do it, you don't. You can do it, but you don't need to do it. And in most cases, it's not viable. Like, if you want to Doomstack, say, with High Elves, you could take Star Dragons. If you want to Doomstack with Lizardmen, you take all monstrous creatures. You can take, like, all Stegodons, or you can even take fucking all Carnosaurs, whatever. But again, they're also much more expensive and a lot harder to recruit a full army of. So they're not something you're going to recruit until the extreme late game. And you've got to get to the late game by using some of these armies first to get there. If you can't survive to the late game, you can't recruit those armies. So that's why I'm not recommending Doomstacks. The exceptions to them are that Beastmen can get a Doomstack quicker than other races, as can Chaos with Shaggoths. But you don't need to use them in order to win. You don't. You can win the game with other armies. I'm doing a very hard chaos campaign at the moment using this setup. The only difference is I've not got a sorcerer in my army, I've got an exalted champion. Exalted champions are the better scouts because they can assassinate. Sorcerers have got more utility for you in battle, especially in sieges. But I did it to make it harder on myself. But I'm approaching 300 turns on that campaign purely because I have to stop the Empire and Dwarves recolonizing stuff. The Empire and Dwarves are now dead. I've just got to kill Batonians and I've won the campaign. Because I'm not going to bother killing the High Elves because they've got 89 settlements because Malekith got his shit pushed in. But this is showing you an army that can work. Chaos Warriors Great Weapons. I think you start with the unit of Chosen with, I think, Archeon or someone. Chaos Knights, really good cavalry. One unit of Armoured Chaos Trolls. Again, they are to bring down the gates for the Knights so the Knights can get inside a city. It's basically their purpose. And the mid and late game, as it says here, you basically change your Chaos Warriors out for Chosen. So you've got all Chosen Great Weapons and Chaos Knights. The reason you have Chosen Great Weapons is this is what they have standard. 48 melee attack, 46 melee defense. This is showing here 59, 57 at rank 9. When you've got your red tree upgrades from your Lord, they have 78 melee attack and 76 melee defense. They will kill anything. Anything you put in front of them, they will kill it. So you send your Chosen Great Weapons forward. They don't break easily because they've got high leadership. Your Chaos Knights dominate the flank. They can kill the cavalry and they can go around and murder all the range units and artillery. And I've been doing it. I've faced half Doomstacks from Alethanar. He's come at me with like 8 dragons and a phoenix or an eagle. And I've killed those. Chosen will kill anything. You get them to rank 9 and you've got your red tree upgrades, they'll kill anything. And you won't have to worry about armies like that until the late game anyway. So by that point you'll have those armies. So these armies do work and they're easy to recruit. And it requires a little bit more skill to play than a Doomstack. But that's the point, is it teaches you how to play the game at a higher skill level than relying upon a big monster that's damn near impossible to kill. Because this is what the Doomstack is, basically. For these, it's a Shaggoth, this here. It's got 8,500 health, obscene amounts of damage, and then good melee attack and defense stats. And basically you have a Lord, a Hero, and you have 18 of those. That's the Chaos Doom stack. But it basically plays itself. There's no skill required. It dominates in battle, it dominates in sieges. I mean, this can dominate as well. You'll take a bit more damage on your troops because they're not as stupidly fucking strong as they are. But you don't need to doom stack in order to win, is what I'm saying. So I hope you guys have learnt a bit here. So I've given you 7 possible armies. You've had High Elves, Lizardmen, Empire and Dwarves. Dwarves have got pure ranged. Lizardmen have pretty much got pure melee. And then your Empire and High Elves have got a mix of both melee and ranged armies. You've got basically your pure ranged army for your Dark Elves. And then you've got melee for Beastmen and Chaos. But it shows you the armies that can work in both your early, mid and your late game. So you know what to recruit into your army. And then you know where your red skill points are going on your Lord. Because you're only buffing those units that are in your army. And hopefully it will encourage some newer players to try out different armies. And give you an easier time playing the game. So you don't get as frustrated about losing or probably not even having the chance of losing in some cases. And then if you get used to using these types of armies when you're new to the game, when you've got a few hundred hours in the game and you're going into high difficulties, these armies will still work for you. So you haven't got to think, what have I got to recruit now? Obviously as well in these armies, I've not included any regiments of renown. I've not included special lords. You know, you've got those units that you can add in that you might come across. Like example, they've got like Swords of Chaos, a regiment of renown unit of Chaos Knights. So you can stick that into an army. So just so you guys know, but I hope you've enjoyed. If you have, give me a thumbs up. If you think I've missed anything out, drop me a comment down below. If it's about armies I've not done, there's a reason for that, because this is for newer players. So I'm giving them the stronger armies for good and evil factions. I don't intend on doing one for the other factions because they are more finicky and harder to play for newer players to the game. This is to get more people involved, especially with the release of Warhammer 3 not far away. It's to get them into the game and give them strong armies they can use from the outset, and it gives them a bit of variety as well because they've got good and evil, and you've got 7 different playable factions with a number of lords. There's another video that I did on the factions themselves and where the lords start, because some of the lords have harder starting locations which might still make it difficult for you. So probably pick out the easier starting location ones, then move on to more difficult ones later on when you've got a bit more experience in the game. And if you are new around here, please drop me a subscription. It really helps grow my channel. I'm aiming for quite a big push on YouTube this year. And all my links are down below in the description. Take care everyone and have a great day.